Let's start with the origins of Bitcoin and how did this whole thing start? And what is it?
This is a way we can break free.
We have Puey, a visionary at the intersection of tech and cryptocurrency.
Bitcoin was founded or created by an anonymous developer who called himself or themselves Satoshi Nakamoto. October 31st, 2008, he published a white paper and proposed the ability to send and receive a digital money between people with nothing more than a computer and an internet connection. Bitcoin was meant to solve a lot of the problems in the current banking and the financial industry. Think about it. If you've ever owned something of digital value, credit on a debit card, gift card of value, you've never actually controlled it yourself.
It cannot exist in two places at once.
Yeah, that's what kind of makes it unique.
And that digital uniqueness, I think that was a revolutionary move forward. Who do you think Satoshi Nakamoto is, if you had a guess?
But we highly suspect that it's more than one person.
It's very likely that one or more of them are no longer alive.
Some think members of the CIA that have been part of it. If I had to guess.
So Paul, let's start off with, for our viewers out there who have no idea what Bitcoin is and how did this whole thing start. Let's start with maybe a quick minute around the origins of Bitcoin and what is it?
Yeah, so the origins of Bitcoin, as many people do know, Bitcoin was founded or created by an anonymous developer who called himself or themselves Satoshi Nakamoto. And in October 31st of 2008, he published a white paper, put it out on what we call like Usenet or like the forums in the cryptography circles, and proposed a decentralized digital currency. We call it peer-to-peer electronic cash. The ability to send and receive a digital cash, a digital money between people with nothing more than a computer and an internet connection. At its heart, that's what kind of makes it unique. We've never seen ever in the world. And think about it. If you've ever owned something of digital value, you've never actually controlled it yourself. You've always had to go through an intermediary to hold it or send and receive it, whether it be credit on a debit card, a gift card of value, which I know you definitely know a lot about gift cards, right? All of those are really held by the merchant. The merchant's the one that says there is some value here and that you've transferred it to the store or to someone else. This is the first time that you could actually transfer value. So that was the white paper. The network wasn't actually launched yet. And then it wasn't until January 3rd, 2009, which we now consider Bitcoin's birthday, that the network was launched and Satoshi himself, herself, themselves launched the first node that effectively started mining Bitcoin. That's a whole nother little topic we can go into, but that's the origin story because 2008, 2009, we can, further back in a way, the technology that built Bitcoin used smaller technologies that have been developed for decades prior by a lot of the cypherpunks and whatnot. But its true origin, 2008, 2009, October 31st, Halloween. Remember that, in some ways we celebrate that in the crypto space is the Bitcoin white paper day. And then January 3rd, 2009 is when the network actually launched. Although at that time, just about nobody was using it.
Yeah. Well, it was a scary day for the incumbents in the world system. The banks, etc.
And you'll probably know. Remember the first block mine had definitely a very notable message.
Yep. Just after the financial crisis. So
right after the financial crisis, Bitcoin was born out of the last Great Recession, and Satoshi Nakamoto had put a message in the first block. One thing, as miners mine blocks, they're able to put little messages into them. And the message was the chancellor on the brink of second bailout. I think it was second bailout. Really referencing that Bitcoin was meant to solve a lot of the problems in the current banking industry and the financial industry. It was born out of the crisis. Interestingly enough, it hasn't actually seen a major crisis, and that's a larger topic for today as far as the purpose of Bitcoin. Hasn't yet, but it potentially will, and all kind of the word is out yet as far as how it will do in that next financial crisis. But the fact that it was built for it, I think it'll do quite well.
Okay, so who do you think Satoshi Nakamoto is, if you had a guess?
If I had to guess, one of the old cypherpunk cryptographers, right? And there's a number of them. Some think Adam Back from Blockstream is one of the people behind it. I don't necessarily subscribe to that theory.
Yeah,
I've heard of people.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so either, but that definitely has been talked about. I've heard people say that there's actually members of the CIA that have been part of it.
I don't buy that either.
So I don't honestly have.
And I don't think it's Hal Finney either, who's he passed away, but I don't think it's him. My theory is that it was a group
for sure,
3 people, just the way it was done, and I think that it's very likely that one or more of them are no longer alive.
Very possibly. And I think
yeah.
we know that it's more, we're not know, but we highly suspect that it's more than one person, primarily because the writings are different.
Yes.
The Satoshi Nakamoto that posted on certain forum groups versus the ones that had email discussions with people versus the code.
Yeah.
And actually looking at the code and look at the comments in the code.
And the time of day. And the time of day. So it looks like there was somewhere either in Asia, New Zealand, Australia, somewhere around there at the time.
Now, granted, people are up at all times of the day, especially as developers. But let's be real, there is a better chance that it is multiple people, especially because of the communication. And that's the one thing that stands out. You know, the way you spell, like, you know, the word valor and color is spelled a little bit different.
Definitely Commonwealth. I'm South African, so
exactly.
It's definitely more English spelling. So I would say that he was probably Australian or New Zealand.
And really kind of getting back to like, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? One of the beauties is
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And so many people will criticize Bitcoin as, oh my God, there's this person that had built it or people that had built it. And maybe they control it because they mined a whole lot of Bitcoin in its early phases, which is probably a nugget for the noobs learning about Bitcoin. Yes, if you were mining Bitcoin early.
No, you know, everyone makes the assumption that
that
Satoshi mined those coins, the first million coins, but it's not actually proven, right?
And although it's not proven, but it's a safe assumption.
It's definitely someone in the group.
It's someone in the group, like one of the people in the group. But the most important thing is it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You could hold all of that coin, but you don't necessarily control Bitcoin.
That's
right?
true.
You don't control what it becomes in the future. You don't control what it has been over the past several years. Owning the coin, while many advantages come with owning the coin, it doesn't necessarily grant control of the network and what it can do.
Hi, this is Vinny. Thank you for being a viewer or subscriber to my channel. And if you are a viewer and not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. I love producing content for you guys, and I really appreciate all the feedback and the comments that you post. I want to hear from you about which guests you want to see on my show, and more importantly, which questions you want to ask them. I'm going to try my best to get them on just for you. Thanks so much, and now back to the show. So let's talk about the coins. These are digital coins. Now, when I first heard about Bitcoin in 2013, it made me think about MP3s. And I'll tell you why. I always looked back in the days, and for those of you who've never had MP3s before listening, back in the days, early 2000s, MP3s are the way you store digital music files, right?
Yep.
And you could copy them. So, like, I'd have some MP3s, I'd make copies, I'd give it to friends of mine, or I'd get from friends of mine. You go to Kazaa, LimeWire, all these Napster download sites, and you download these MP3s. And it was only until streaming came along where people said, well, the cost is $10 a month.
Yep.
Why waste my time? But you used to buy these things from Apple, and I used to pay. I used to be one of the few people paid for all my music. But I now have this file. But I have a copy of this file, and I could copy it, and other people could copy it as well. So there was no digital uniqueness to each and every MP3 file. So when I came across Bitcoin, I was like, well, this is great. So if I have a copy of a Bitcoin, or I have a Bitcoin, it cannot exist in two places at once.
Yep.
Only I can have it. If I can't copy it and give it to you. I can send it to you, but then I don't have it anymore. And with an MP3, I could copy an MP3 and send it to you, and we'd both have a copy of it. And that digital uniqueness is what got me into the whole Bitcoin and cryptocurrency world, because I think that was a revolutionary move forward. Now, let's talk about how do we know that it's unique?
Right.
Let's talk about, so, you mentioned there was the existing financial system, or whether it's a gift card system with merchants, there's a ledger of record, but the ledger is owned and controlled by the merchant of record or the bank. Mm-hmm. How does the Bitcoin decentralized ledger system work?
So you mentioned an MP3, and with an MP3, when you share it, you're literally just copying it.
Yeah.
And ironically, while Bitcoin was meant to replace the banking system, it actually mirrors it very closely. And I tell people, look at your ledger of transactions when you have your bank statement. Like you have a bank statement, it shows all the transactions that you've made, it shows the amounts, who you sent the money to, or where the money came from. But the bank holds that, and they are the source of truth. Now take Bitcoin. It simply takes that ledger, that Excel sheet that shows all of the transactions that have happened, and it now distributes that to thousands of computers, to anyone that actually wants to run the ledger. And by doing so, you no longer trust a single source, a single entity, a single company, a single person to determine whether or not the money has been transferred, how much money somebody has, and whether or not they can transfer to another entity, which is one of its powers, is that it's censorship resistant. I can transfer to this random address, this bank account number in its analogy, And there isn't a decision as to whether I'm allowed to, other than do I have enough money to send that transaction. That is really, in a way, it's not digital uniqueness. So a lot of people think of it as digital uniqueness, but instead, it's simply taking that ledger of record, like you'd mentioned, and distributing it around the world to thousands, if not tens of thousands of computers that then contribute in the validation of whether a transaction can or can't happen.
That's a great explanation. And I think, it should help people watching or listening to this understand how important Bitcoin is in the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem, because it was the first. It also has the most amount of compute power going into Bitcoin, more than any other network. So it's the most secure. And I think no one disagrees with how decentralized Bitcoin is relative to all other cryptocurrencies. No one disagrees with how much compute power goes to secure the network. And this is why we've seen the price when we got in the tens, like what, 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks in those days, early 2013, to 40 something thousand right now.
Yeah, it's about 40,
69,000.
Yeah, 68, 69 at peak. We're at 40,
Yeah.
past that halfway mark.
Yeah.
And I think people are seeing the early days, like when you got into it, you saw a lot of strong ideology. You saw either technologists that were fascinated by the technology, and I was one of those. Then you see the ideologists who came and said, oh my God, this is a way we can break free from a lot of the established system, which I was also one of those at the same time. And then some opportunists, just a few of those as opportunists, like buy, sell.
Yeah.
Obviously, the times have changed, and the shift from ideology to opportunist has shifted alongside, which is fair.
Well, I think like we should probably spend a little bit of time talking about how the original sort of people, myself, you, and a whole bunch of people early on, believe this as peer-to-peer digital cash, money that you can move around. And then there's a new sort of
narrative.
A new narrative that formed afterwards where, for technical reasons, which we won't go into right now, that believe that it's a store of value.
Right.
And I'm not sure I totally agree with that over at least the short term, maybe in the long term, but in the short term, the store of value narrative is kind of a different narrative from the original starting,
for sure,
the white paper of Bitcoin. But it is what it is today. Like, I'm not going to,
people define it.
Yeah, people define it, and the community, we objected to it in 2017. The community defined it as a store of value, and that's what it's been since 2017 now, with all the sort of changes that happen in the ecosystem. And I don't want to, again, that's a whole political debate and discussion. But it is what it is. It is the largest market
people
cap.
about it. Yeah.
And let's teach people about it, and it's a better system. Whether we think it could have gone in a different direction or not, it's almost irrelevant at this point. It's a better system than what we have today. And so Bitcoin is really a way for people to, take custody of their own funds.
Absolutely.
The price of it changes. So you take some risk. So, you're trading sort of denomination risk. If you held $1,000 in your account and it was $1,000, in a week's time it's still $1,000. With Bitcoin, if you held $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, it could be 900. It could be 1,100.
I like to tell people, don't measure it in dollars.
Measure in Bitcoin, but
measure it in eggs, measure it in bacon, measure it in anything else.
But it is true. However, on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, people have to pay bills. So you have to at least keep in mind that there is some fluctuation. The good news is, as Bitcoin has risen to the thousands, it doesn't really move by more than a couple of percentage points a day. Once a year you might see a big move of 10% in a few days.
As they say, the bigger the ship, the less it's going to get hit by the waves.
Exactly.
And Bitcoin's become a multi-$100 billion ship, veering on $1 trillion.
So it's become very stable.
Right.
So it's actually stable enough for you to store at least some portion of your wealth. I always tell people, every millionaire should own one Bitcoin. There's only 21 million Bitcoins out there that'll ever be mined. I think we're at 19.5 million right now. Right. So there's a supply scarcity, and that's guaranteed by the network of computers. And obviously people have spoken about trying to increase that.
People ask how, though. That's interesting. Maybe that's a topic to talk on is, how does the network even guarantee that there is a supply scarcity?
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
And so the thing that most people ask me when they say, I don't get Bitcoin, is how is it secured, and what is mining? And mining might sound like a really, really technical thing, but I think it's worthwhile to get into and tell people it's actually quite simple.
And let's talk about the halving as well. So let's go into how do we mine? How do we get to 21 million coins? And what is the halving that happens? And because it's happening very soon, within the next 2 months or so.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get into that.
Yeah. So mining. Let's go back to where does the word even come from? Gold mining.
Yeah.
Right. So in gold mining, you expend energy by virtue of shovels in the old days, maybe in the old days, spoons, or literally just your bare hands would go around, walking around town, picking up gold. And as you picked up all the gold on the ground, it became harder, so you had to use shovels. And as it got harder, you had to use machines. And where we are today, you're literally using these multi-thousand-ton machines to dig the earth to get gold. Bitcoin works very similarly from the viewpoint of the issuance of Bitcoin, right? Early on, it was super easy. You take a laptop, spin it up, and it started mining Bitcoin. And it gets harder and harder over time. But what exactly is that process? Like, what are you doing when you're mining Bitcoin? Is, in a way, you're just playing a game. I like to give people the analogy that they're playing a game against everyone else that's mining. And in a way, that game is similar to rolling dice, but closer to solving a puzzle. And if you're the first one to solve a puzzle, you're the one that wins some Bitcoin. You know, some people like playing Monopoly. First person across go gets 200. Here, the first person to solve this numeric puzzle. And the funny thing about this numeric puzzle is you don't solve it by actually thinking hard about it. You solve it like a monkey. You literally throw numbers at it and then check if the numbers fit, much like a Sudoku puzzle. Sudoku, you can actually put your mind to it and go, okay, think these numbers add up. I'll put this number here, put this number there. But miners are effectively solving Sudoku puzzles by randomly throwing numbers and just being very, very fast at checking whether or not the puzzle matches.
It's just brute force calculation.
It's brute force, right? We call it brute force in the technical world. Yeah. In the layman world, it's monkeys throwing numbers and then checking. And how fast you can check determines how fast you can mine. And really, if the two of us were mining, I'd be trying to solve a puzzle. And as soon as I determine that I've solved it, I'd throw it up in there and go, guys, I've thrown it up. Right now, it's just the two of us. And if you check it and go, yep, you're right, Paul, you've solved it. You now, in your ledger, because both of us are like the bank, right? Both of us have that ledger. You'll then give me points for having one, much like in Monopoly, you'll write down the score. You'll say, okay, Paul, you've got now, in the old days, 50 Bitcoin. And now we restart again. And we have a new puzzle that starts up. And we both try to solve that puzzle as fast as possible. And so you can imagine if you have a fast computer, you're able to throw numbers at it and check if it's right much faster than if you had a slow computer. If you had a lot of computers, you could make many different guesses at the same time and check all of them to see whether or not one of them has the solution. And you could do that faster and effectively make more money. So at the end of the day, that's really half the purpose of mining, is the issuance of the currency onto the network, and it's solving these weird numerical puzzles in a brute force way that gets Bitcoin out in the network just the way people dug up gold. And you have to burn energy to do so. You've got to buy this equipment. You have to pay staff to mine it. You've got to burn electricity to mine Bitcoin. And so at the end of the day, it's still work, right? And what's the form of work in gold mining? It's physical, some degree of electrical, manual. And in Bitcoin mining, it's electrical, some degree of physical equipment as well. So it has a very, very nice analogy and mirror in what it does. And that's half of what Bitcoin mining is for, is really the issuance of the coin to the network.
And so when the system was designed, it's a fun fact. People don't appreciate this. The 21 million number isn't hard-coded in the code anyway.
Yeah, it's not. And it's not exactly 21 million either.
It's not hard-coded. But what it is there was the original code base and the original code from Bitcoin was the first blocks were 50. And then after, it's not actually a number of years, it's a number of blocks. Yeah, so after 4 years worth of blocks roughly, depending on, there's things called difficulty adjustments, etc., which we won't go into. But after about 4 years it goes on to 25. So that's when we got it. We got class of 25. And then afterwards it went to 12.5.
Yep.
And now it's at 6.25. And in about 2 months' time, we're going to go down to 3.125 coins per block. So this halving, every time it happens, it creates a supply shock. And that means that there's just less coins coming out of the system, but there's always, and there has been historically more and more buyers that want these coins. Right. So now the price just goes up. So we've seen historically, right before, about 12 months before halving, the price doubles, which it already has. And then after halving, there's this huge bull run that happens because people realize there's a whole bunch of coins that aren't coming out of the system, and people are buying there are people
miners
who save.
Are selling less. Yep.
Miners are selling less, and people are buying more and more. So the crypto world is really expecting a bull run in Bitcoin, 2024 this year. I think we get up to 100,000 plus. I don't think it goes to 200,000, but I think we're in the 90 to 120K range post halving. And that's like, a good 3x from here. Hopefully, if things hold out. And that's, who knows what the future looks like, but we should see this sort of run up, and hopefully it's a lot more stable than previous years. Because it reduces roughly every 4 years by 50%, it tends towards about 21 million. I think over the next 20, 30 years, whatever it is, it's
turned to really small.
Yeah, it gets really small.
You'll be mining one Satoshi, which for those that don't know is 100 millionth of a Bitcoin in 100 years
from now.
Miners will literally be mining the smallest unit.
Yeah.
And it's when that unit can no longer be divided in half that there will be no more Bitcoin issued out onto the network.
So that's different from the government, right? So government goes and issues $1 trillion worth of money today. They've inflated the money supply by X percentage, right? So if you have let's say your money supply is in the US, I think money supply is for $80 trillion. You issue like 1%, it's 1.25%, 1.125% inflation, right? Just by issuing some money that didn't exist before.
Yep.
Okay, so the Bitcoin system is basically a system where we have guaranteed supply knowledge. So we all know what the supply curve looks like,
right?
And so and we all trade this with each other as a form of money, because there's enough people in the world that want to buy and sell Bitcoin that it has billions traded every single day, and it's like gold. I've always called Bitcoin a commodity now. Like, I think it's more of a commodity than actually a money or store of value. Yeah. It's a commodity, and commodity prices fluctuate.
The government's actually categorized that to some degree as a commodity.
And now we have ETFs as well.
Yep.
So let's talk about what the average person out there can do with Bitcoin today. I mean, you can pay for stuff.
You sure can.
But I think the primary use case these days, it looks like a savings vehicle, and when you need because it's got deep liquidity pools. If I go and buy Bitcoin today and I need the money in 6 months and I sell it, I can take it out. Yeah. People in other countries in the world, because Bitcoin is very stable in dollar terms, you may be sitting in Argentinian pesos,
yep.
or South African rands, whatever it is, and you're worried about the currency being debased. You can go buy Bitcoin and hold on to it for a year or two or whatever it is, and you'll probably do better than the rate of debasement or inflation of this currency, especially since Bitcoin is pegged to dollars, not any other soft currency. So I have a Ballet wallet here. I like to pull this out. This is ballet.com. I'm an investor in the company, and what they do is they create these hard wallets. So these wallets are not available offline in any way. You can't remotely hack it. It has a code in the back, a public key. If you wanted to send me money, you could send it to this key here, and I'd receive it on this coin. This one holds 1/10 of a Bitcoin.
Like $4,000 today.
Yeah, like $4,000 today.
On one little
and
tiny
it's
piece.
Unhackable because of the way it's designed. Now let's talk about how the private key, which is secured physically on this wallet, how the private key is secured and how you secure private keys.
In general.
Yeah,
and what are private keys? Probably a lot of the audience don't even know what a private key is.
Exactly. What's a private key? What's a public key? And maybe while I have this, I'll just address that. So the public key is like my handle on a Venmo account. Okay?
Yep.
It's like my handle on any social media account. Once you know this, you can send me money, but you cannot get it with knowing my handle. Only I have to have access, so I have to have the codes that link to this to basically send the money out. And that's the private key. And so you can secure, a couple of $1,000 on one of these wallets, and you could use it, move it wherever you want to move it to, right? It's physical, it's offline.
Right.
That's one way of storing Bitcoin, through a hard wallet like this. What are the other ways you can store Bitcoin?
So that one happens to be a what we call a physical or hardware wallet or offline wallet. There's different terms for it. Cold storage is another.
This is cold storage.
That's cold. Yeah.
I go cold storage because it was never connected online. It's air gapped. There's no, the company produces this in such a way that it's ultra secure. And you can't do a firmware update on this.
Yeah, there's no software. It's a non-computing device.
You cannot remotely access this
in any way, shape,
or form. Whereas with like a Ledger or Trezor, you can get
it still plugs into your computer.
It still plugs into the computer. Malware gets onto it. They can take the coins away from you.
Yeah.
And then so let's go through the different ways you can store Bitcoin, buy and store Bitcoin. And obviously your company produces one of the best wallets out there. So let's talk about that too.
Yeah. So let's go from kind of the most I won't call it most secure because I think most secure is a poor term.
Yeah.
Because that assumes security is linear, like 0 to 100.
Yes.
But I'll say the kind of coldest form, meaning most disconnected from computing devices, which is exactly what you're looking at right here.
Yes.
Or even as little as as simple as a piece of paper. Right? You can literally hold a private key, which once again explain to the audience what is a private key versus a public key. These are really just two numbers. A private key is such a gigantic random number that nobody can guess it.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. And you could do something like rolling dice to create a private key. My co-founder actually did that in his early days of owning Bitcoin. He rolled dice, and from the dice, create a large random number, and he'd put that on a piece of paper, and then that was his private key. From that, you derive a public key.
Yep.
And it can't go backwards. That's the cryptographic principle. A public key can't become a private key. So you can give a public key to anybody, and you say, send me money to this address. That becomes your address. And the Bitcoin network recognizes it and associates money to a specific address. But the private key is like your wrist. If you want to write a check to spend the money, you need the private key. And without that key, you can't create the signature that signs the check that says send from this address, this public key, to a destination public key. So keeping the private key secure is of utmost importance. So literally a piece of paper, rolling dice could be the most kind of offline way of holding Bitcoin. Next level from there, where you're using a computing device, but that is largely disconnected from the internet, would be a hardware wallet that would look like a USB stick or maybe a dedicated computing device. You may have heard of some companies such as Ledger or Trezor and a few others that create similar like devices. These do have a computing chip on them, a dedicated CPU. And the goal of these, they're not that different in architecture from, say, a mobile phone or a computer. The point being is it just has less software on it. So having less software on it simply means that there's less chance for bad software to get onto it.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't have any software, not that there can't be anything.
You have to have physical access, or you have to plug it into a connected device. So you could have your coins stored on an address where the key is generated on a ledger device, and have that ledger device offline for years, and it's perfectly safe. But the moment you plug it into an internet connected computer, there is a risk there.
So actually, that's assuming that it was generated safe to begin with.
Yes.
So as soon as there's a computing device involved,
Yes.
that computing device is the one that creates the random number.
Yes.
Oops. And so what people forget is just the creation of the random number needs to be something that's secure.
Yes.
So while you might have something that, is almost never connected to the internet, if bad software got to it in the first place when it was created, it may create a random number that's not truly random.
That's true. And so what happens is you also get people who buy these ledger devices
that are not from Ledger.
which are not from Ledger, or they're intercepted in the mail.
Exactly.
So if and they get their malware, they get malware put onto it, whatever else. When it connects to the internet, then compromises the security of the drive. And Ledger's gone a long way to fix this, and there are other companies out there that do this. I think there's Keystone, there's Trezor, Ledger. There's a bunch of these companies that are building super secure crypto wallets, but there's always a risk. So you have to basically look. And so how do you mitigate the risks? Right? There's using multiple wallets is one way of doing it, and having multiple locations where you store things.
So multi-sig is one option as well that some people have, and I think multi-sig's come a long way since the days when we got involved in Bitcoin. I think it was
barely. You have MPC right now, which is a form of multi-sig.
It's a form of multi-sig. And so to give an idea of what is multi-sig, the analogy there is a shared checking account, right? So you go to the bank, you're with your wife, you've tied the knot, right? We're going to have a shared checking account. There's a contract that you create with the bank, and the bank enforces the contract. And that contract states the rules by which money can be withdrawn. And the rule typically for a lot of people is, well, either my wife has to sign it or I have to sign it. That's pretty easy. It's like there's no security behind that. It's just
or above
access.
A certain limit. You both
have to sign it.
Yes.
Exactly. So above a limit, both have to sign it. Or, maybe you got into a relationship that you're not too sure about, and you include a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so either my wife and I sign it, so 2 signatures are required to remove money from this bank account, or one of us and a lawyer sign. So you can think of those rules as almost being these little mini contracts. Bitcoin has the capability, although I think without the exception of the amount, the ability to say you need more than one signature to sign to remove money. You can even have a time lock.
Well,
to say
you can use third-party services for this. So BitGo, for example, you
Exactly.
can put limits, and then they manage the keys on the. So
But that's not
but
Bitcoin.
It's not the native protocol.
It's not
a
the native
third-party
protocol.
company. Yeah.
Exactly. It's another company, much like you have your lawyer promise he won't sign unless X, Y, or Z happens, right?
So let's talk about these. Sorry, let's talk about these things. Okay, so you've got this notion of self-custody, where you're in control of your keys, and the Bitcoin world, we say not your keys, not your coins.
Yeah.
Then you have third-party custody, so you use an exchange like a Coinbase, and then you also have custodian services where they aren't an exchange like BitGo, for example, or Anchorage.
It's just simply custody.
And you give your coins to them, you set up the rules with them, they manage the keys underlying it, and you have some level of security. And then you've got other software wallets like what you've got
like
at Edge, where you can also set up some rules and manage the keys yourself. But you have to keep your seed phrase very, very secure and safe. Yeah. And I think this is where people get messed up. Like they share their seed phrases with random strangers, and they think that or they try and do customer support with a fake provider.
Right.
So in other words, like let's say you have a Ledger or you have a MetaMask wallet or whatever it is, and someone messages you purporting to be from MetaMask, and they need your seed phrase to fix some problem, and people who don't know, they just go, oh, here you go, here's my codes.
Please help.
Please help. And then they lose all their funds. And this happens
all
every
the
single
time.
day.
So working at a company that does build a cryptocurrency self-custody app, wallet, we see it all from the viewpoint of customer support. I wish I had Michael on our team here in my ear saying all the different issues that have come about. But fundamentally, we have a bit of a disagreement with industry at Edge. And it's that we think people should custody their own funds. And there's many reasons for doing that we can go into, but we don't think people should see their private key. They shouldn't have to see their private key. And that is admittedly at odds with a lot of the industry. And we see that most of the people that have lost funds saw their private key at one point in time. There was a very popular cryptocurrency wallet called Jax. And I'm not throwing
I remember that.
Jax under the bus. Anthony Diorio, great guy. And I think he had a great product at the time. And there's nothing against Jax. Everything I'm about to say is nothing about Jax itself. It's about the process. Anthony had sunsetted Jax, and in the process, said, "Hey, transfer your funds to Edge, as a recommended wallet to transfer funds to." But because at the sunset, the only way for people to do that was to take the key out. Like you couldn't actually send the money anymore. Like all the nodes and servers were down, and it was people for potentially the first time ever handling the actual private key material, the key, what looks like words, by the way, for all the noobs out there. When you see a private key, most of the time it's in the form of 12 to 24 random English words. And it was their mismanagement of handling that key, whether it be putting it in a malicious app, putting it in their photo album, which gets synced with Google Cloud, putting it in their notes, before they're able to transfer it into Edge, that caused millions of dollars of loss. And so fundamentally, I think that the future of crypto is such that people do hold that key, but they don't have to physically see it, and it can be protected with multiple layers. And there's other companies in addition to Edge. We do some layers.
Built at Civic. We built an identity-based wallet, so your keys were obfuscated. You wouldn't see them. You just have your identity to access them. If you lose them, we had third-party stuff. The biggest problem we had, the same reason why we shut the wallet down, is Anthony. It's just like there's not enough demand for some of these solutions, and we had to navigate how people store coins, where they store coins. And I think, end of the day, a lot of people just went to Coinbase.
A lot of people do.
And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. So when people ping me and say, Vinny, how do I store my money? I ask them, like, my first question is, how much are you trying to store? Often the answer is like $10,000, maybe it's 100. And I go, you know what? It's safer at Coinbase. Get a vault, use Coinbase, lock it down, you're fine. The odd chance that someone comes to me and says, Vinny, I'm trying to store like 1 to X millions, the first thing I say to them is, okay, do you care? I mean, first of all, what jurisdiction are you in? Do you care about, are you worried about anyone taking it away from you? Whatever.
Seizure.
Right, are you in a hostile country?
Right.
If you're in a hostile country, you want to self-custody this. So how do you do that? How do you break it up into, $5,000 chunks or $50,000 chunks? And how do you distribute it, in other parts of the world? Or how do you want to do it? So that's a conversation you can have. The alternative is if you're in the U.S. and you're a law-abiding citizen, which pretty much all my friends are.
Actually,
Otherwise I wouldn't call them friends.
I'll take challenge that. Like, what's the rule? What's the rule? We do one felony a day, and we don't realize.
Really?
All right. So the laws are really designed for us to break without knowing. And so if law enforcement wanted to come after us, they could, because we're breaking a law all the time. You just don't know it, and that's why the law book is gigantic.
Yeah, it's probably
not even. There's no one lawyer that knows every law
I kind of sit
in the
at home.
country.
I kind of sit at home and work from my computer. I don't think I'm breaking rules, but I get your point.
Yeah, exactly. So
I did get stopped by the cops the other night because I did the California roll on a stop sheet, but let's just assume you're in the US and you're trying to legitimately store a large amount of crypto, $1 million plus.
Yep.
Custodians are often the best solution for those people. So all the big players, there are lots of custodians out there. There's Anchorage, there's Coinbase Prime, there's BitGo. I think Fidelity is in that business now as well. And so institutions, that's where you go to store it. And now you've got the ETFs where you can buy crypto or buy Bitcoin rather, and if you have a trading account with Fidelity, it's stored there. Is effectively a custodian service. The biggest issue with that is, again, not your coins, not your crypto. So when exchanges go under, your coins go with it. Look at FTX 2 years ago. Boom. Everyone thought FTX was safe, and all your money's gone. I mean, apparently they're going to pay back some of it now. But this is where self-custody is something I think we should be teaching everyone. Like, everyone should learn how to self-custody, except large institutions and family offices where you have too many people touching the money. Custodian services are way better. If you've got $10 million in your family office that you want to put into Bitcoin, like high net worth people, and you've got 3 guys running your family office, I don't recommend having the stuff in cold storage somewhere in a safe because, I
do think the future is multi-sig.
Multi-sig,
and so if you have multiple people,
yeah.
Correct. MPC or multi-sig, which are basically by and large the same thing.
Exactly.
And that is the future because that mirrors the way we're used to holding money today.
Yes.
Today we might need.
But the native services are on MPC.
They're not friendly yet.
So
not yet.
I'm an early investor in BitGo. I'm not invested in Coinbase, but I would trust BitGo over pretty much running it, doing it myself on the blockchain because they've built the service around it. They're managing billions of dollars. So I do think there are custodians that you can trust.
There are some that you can. The hard part is how does the end user evaluate? And to give an example, you mentioned the ETFs, and you think
Coinbase
ETFs
Prime is fine. Coinbase is a public company. You can trust them on what they're doing. I mean, the fees might not be good.
Yeah.
So let's separate the two. There's a trade-off, right? If you have no idea what you're doing, pay the fees and sleep well
better than
at
losing.
night. Yeah, and then sleep well at night.
Right. One of the ETFs bragged about the transparency of Bitcoin because it's true. An ETF says it can claim they are holding a certain amount of Bitcoin, which is how many shares they've issued.
Yes.
Right? They can match the amount of shares issued and have transparency by publishing the addresses, and people can see on a blockchain publicly this is how much Bitcoin's in the address. One of the ETFs is holding over hundreds of millions of dollars in a single address, and that's the entire ETF.
Yeah. So I published a tweet about this 7 years ago. Okay, and my tweet was, we'll put up on the screen here, hopefully. The tweet was Satoshi invented Bitcoin, so we could decentralize money or something along those lines.
So we can.
Yeah, and then we go create an ETF to put it all together, right? It's like, and I've always said Bitcoin will be successful when it's held by large numbers of people in small amounts.
Right.
And so the more we put all this money into ETFs and whatever else, we're centralizing this money, and things go wrong, and we've seen it go wrong.
We talk about it from a security point of view, and I think that's what people will care about by and large.
Yeah.
There's probably some listeners out there that want to understand like the monetary incentive of Bitcoin. We talked about that at the very beginning. The fact that this is a money that has a very finite value, a finite amount, and that gives it value. Look back at gold. We talked about the analogy of Bitcoin and gold has a somewhat unknown but relatively finite supply. Right, there's more that we can dig up. An asteroid could hit us.
So
gold hit us in a bunch of more gold.
So I'll qualify that. Finite supply on Earth.
On Earth, exactly. Like an asteroid could hit us, which was what I was about to say.
A gold asteroid could hit us, and all of a sudden we've got
tons of gold. So Bitcoin's better than gold.
Bitcoin's better than gold.
Way better than
gold.
We
have no idea. We know how much Bitcoin there is. We don't know how much gold there is in the universe.
Exactly. Yeah. So Bitcoin's already better than gold. Yeah. But even when we believed gold had this nice finite supply, and it roughly did because the technology wasn't really there, the one issue with gold was that it wasn't usable enough such that
It's
we
heavy.
needed custodians to make it usable.
Yes.
So we custodied gold with banks because they could issue something more convenient, which was debt.
Paper notes, yeah.
Paper notes and debt. And if you are by and large using gold, but occasionally just using bank debt via these notes, then gold still holds its power because the bank can't do anything other than issue one-for-one paper to gold. As soon as the gold became less utilized, like the utility of gold started to drop because we were just all using the paper, now you give the banks this power to suddenly inflate the supply and no longer have this one-to-one mapping. That inherently is the danger. So if you believe you're holding Bitcoin, whether it be self-custodied or custodied because of this limited supply, know that if you hold it in a custodian, you're increasing the chance that that supply is no longer 21 million at maximum. Just like we incurred that risk with gold, right? We thought it was one-to-one mapped, it was one-to-one mapped, and then we severed that tie because we gave power to the custodians to do so.
So the number one rule, and it's called OPSEC, right? Operational security. When it comes to holding crypto, managing crypto, the number one rule I have is I just don't talk about it. I don't tell people what I do.
Except in the podcast.
Well, I'm telling you what best practices are. You have no idea
which best.
I mean, this is the closest you'll ever get to Bitcoin that I have, and because I brought it into the studio to show it. Right, it's a hard wallet. It's offline. But you should never tell people where you store your Bitcoin, how much Bitcoin you have, how easy it's accessible. In fact, the more inaccessible your crypto is to you, the better. Right, and like whatever you do not store your Bitcoin at home. Don't store, obviously you have a couple $100, that's fine, but like don't store your cold storage stuff, in your home. Don't store it in
burn down or whatnot.
Whatever. Put it places. Give it to your lawyer. Do whatever you want. There's lots of ways to distribute your wealth. But yeah,
you touched on an interesting thing where you said just don't tell people.
Yeah,
that's probably another reason why self-custody is important.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you use a custodian, they know you.
Yes.
They know you. They know how much you're holding.
I'm talking about self-custody. I'm talking about custodianship for institutions and for family offices. They can't really hide that. They can't hide. It's a lot.
It's publicly known anyway.
It's publicly known. A big like Tesla, for example, if they're holding Bitcoin,
it's going to be known.
Yeah, the risk to them having it offline somewhere that one or two
they hold their own though.
Huh?
Although Tesla holds their own Bitcoin, or at least they claim to.
Well, they claim to. You don't know.
They claim to. You don't know.
So and the authority. Remember, so if they like this from a public company governance perspective, if they had $100 million worth of Bitcoin stolen from them because an employee went rogue and they don't know who it was, and it is very easy. Like I can give this to you right now, and no one knows the transaction happened between us.
Right.
So it is. So I would say that custodianship is the high end service for the average person out there. I think Coinbase is probably the most trusted exchange in the world, second to none.
Trusted wise, yes.
Yeah, trust wise, it's a publicly listed company in the U.S. If you're storing small amounts of money there, you're fine. But self custody is so. Coinbase, by the way, let's just point out this: if the government said, "Hey, you know what? We want to take away Paul's access to Joe's to his money in Coinbase," they will freeze your account, or they can freeze your account, and they have, or they someone tries to hack you, and now they have to figure out whether it's you or not, and they put you on a freeze out for a couple of weeks. You don't have access to those funds. Right. So the risk with those services and non self custody is that you can get locked out. Like people have been locked out of their PayPal accounts, Venmo accounts, same thing. No one can lock me out.
It's also transparency of how
no one
much
can
you're
lock me out of this.
No one
if I have this in my hand and I have the seed phrases, I can use this money. It's spendable immediately.
Right.
And so just keep that in mind.
And realize when you have a Coinbase account or a Kraken account or whatnot, there is a non-zero number of people at the company that know how much money you have.
Yeah, exactly.
And whether or not they stay with that company, that information carries. Absolutely. And that becomes not public, but definitely spread beyond just you.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have that money and that this is now an account that's worth targeting. And that's a risk that people kind of don't realize.
Depends what country you're in, because it becomes even bigger risk.
Even if you're US. Even if you're US. And if I know that, Vinny Lingham has this account sitting on Coinbase and this is his email and here's how he secured it with what level of two-factor, blah, 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 or none, then that becomes a target.
Yeah.
And I may not mean to be a malicious person, but I, as a former Coinbase employee, might also be targeted to get that info.
Yeah.
And this is where privacy starts lending into security. That's also one of the big tenets of crypto and Bitcoin is aspects of privacy.
So how much money do you think people should store? How much crypto should they store in their wallets, on their devices, on their phones?
So
because I don't store any crypto on my phone.
I don't say it's how much. It's maybe percent of net worth.
Yeah, I don't store anything on my phone. I think maybe it's a couple $100 just for
playing around and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't store any crypto on my phones.
So I think you can actually store a good amount on your phone.
Yeah,
and so it
no, but like personal security.
Yeah, personal security. So looking at personal security, I mentioned early on where I said security is not a more or less. It's not a 0 to 100. And so if you look at what is the threat of people losing Bitcoin crypto, analyze how much money has been lost and because of what reasons. The reason has not been, oh, I had it on a computing device, and if it was not on a computing device, such as a piece of paper, I wouldn't have lost it. That's not been the reason. Maybe in isolated small cases it has been, but really it's been I've mismanaged the key. Like I took that private key and put it somewhere unsafe, or B, I put it with a custodian, and that custodian messed it up. It's been one of those two things. So if you look at those two things as being the risk, the solution isn't let's make the private key that I still have to manage way, 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 way more secure by putting it way offline in the bunker somewhere, but I still had to actually touch it. I still had to touch it. I had to see it. I had to back it up, and I had to make sure I didn't lose that backup. Very popular article went out about one of the developers from Ripple, who early Bitcoiner had 10,000 I think Bitcoin on a hardware wallet, but he lost the backup. Right, like the seed was lost, and he still had the physical wallet, but he had like one last try to punch in the pin, which he didn't remember or whatnot. This is the type of thing that causes people to lose Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like if you look up articles for someone gets some kind of malware on a computing device.
Well, what about physical safety? Like some people in like Brazil, Africa, wherever. Well, how much money should they store? Because they're, the crime rate's much higher. People get targeted for kidnapping, whatever. So, what how much should you store?
Part of personal net wealth is how I kind of usually put it, and definitely on the safe side, like it feels like 5 to 10%. Is within a safe range because you've still got a significant amount of your personal net wealth.
So what do you do with the balance?
What's that?
What do you do with the balance of the crypto?
Like the remaining balance?
Yeah. I mean, let's say...
So multi-sig is where I would definitely lean towards. And that's where and the hard part about training multi-sig is it's different for every person.
Yeah.
Because multi-sig simply means you need multiple keys to sign to spend the money. Where do you put those keys?
Who do you trust with them?
Who do you trust with them? Yeah. Where do you trust that? And so for some people that have no family, friends that they wouldn't necessarily trust don't even exist, that becomes a tough challenge. And then it's multiple physical locations.
Yes.
Then it might be, a bank vault, and then it might be one place in their home, and then a key sitting at work. Yeah. I don't know, right? Yeah. And I don't want to share what I know people have done. For someone that does have trusted family, maybe it's their mom has one key, and they hold one, and then a sister. All right. Main thing is, just like you said, Vinny, whatever that setup is, there's actually two things. Don't tell people what that setup is.
Yeah.
Don't say my sister has a key, no, has a key. And number two, set up a way to ensure that it's that person. So when you do need to spend the money, are you calling your sister?
AI is going to change the game now.
AI has completely changed the game from the viewpoint of you can't trust who you're talking to, especially digitally. To some degree, you might not even be able to trust if it was a photo or a video. And so the only thing that AI cannot beat is secrets. Right. It's anything that's public, meaning your voice, your image, it can recreate. So having shared secrets between your family members is really the only way. And my wife and I have a shared secret just to know that it's that person. It's not that she has a key to a multi-sig, but just knowing that it's her for any purpose is important. That's probably the one tip I'll give out to the audience is have shared secrets with the people that you trust to ensure it's them, because you'll never know that SMS, that text message, that voice call now really is them for whatever purpose it might be.
Okay, great. So we've spoken about Bitcoin, security, history of Bitcoin, a few other things. I want to move on to other cryptos and talk just broadly about them.
Yeah.
So we have this weird situation now that people have taken advantage of the deep liquidity pools that have existed in crypto, in Bitcoin, and they've applied it to crypto. And then these people buying meme coins and goes up like 1,000%,
and Doge and
whatever,
name it.
right? So it's a joke. What I tell people is, you want to be in crypto. My first bit of advice to build a portfolio is buy some Bitcoin, buy some Ethereum, maybe Solana, buy like the top 3 or 4 or 5 coins. And when you have gains in that, then you can kind of diversify a bit, because
Which is what we see people doing.
You're using house money to go buy other coins. But always make sure the majority of your portfolio is in high quality, top coins. Don't play down the bottom of the tail. And that is because these coins are just not like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is very, very different. Bitcoin is a very unique asset, and everyone else is competing. Ethereum and Solana are competing for who wins that battle on layer 1 smart contracting platform.
There's a couple different categories of coins then.
Yeah,
so
then you have layer 2s as well competing with each other. But I think like Bitcoin is the only one that doesn't have any natural competition at the scale it's at. There's no one who's good. No coin out there I know of is trying to compete for a store of value.
Actually, I think Ethereum is trying.
They've
got a narrative. They got a segment of the Ethereum community is trying.
They think they are
the ultrasound money,
money guys,
right,
but
exactly.
like whatever. I like no one's really buying that narrative either, right?
They're not really, but
it's got some value. It's got utility value more than anything. Like Ethereum is great utility for DeFi. I mean, and so Solana and Ethereum are competing on DeFi.
So let's talk a little bit about what is that utility. So Bitcoin, we mentioned, has this little bit of programmability.
Yeah.
Right. We can create the shared
checking. It used to have a lot
out.
more with script. They took it out.
Yeah. So it has. Let's talk about that limited programmability of I can create this account, and it requires a certain number of signatures out of a certain number of signatures, like a checking account. It could have a time lock on it, so you can use it for inheritance. You have this key that doesn't unlock until the year 2030 or whatnot for your kids. But that's limited programmability.
Yeah.
What really made some of these other coins with the start of Ethereum interesting? With Ethereum, we've took that programmability and made it like full computing capability, run full programs that can not only say X number of keys need to sign and the money can be released, but no, it's X number of tokens, which could be millions of tokens, can vote. And based on that vote, a certain amount of money moves, and it moves into a specific certain address. So it's full programmability. And we can now build these programs. You mentioned the keyword DeFi. That's decentralized finance.
Yeah.
And some of the things that I'm excited about from decentralized finance that have existed for a few years are the ability to, with once again, no counterparty, no centralized exchange like a Coinbase or Kraken, we can now move tokens between people,
yes,
right, and trade between each other entirely using just cryptocurrency and blockchain. And then the second level of that, and I like to say we're taking away layers of the financial stack away from Wall Street. Right. First, it was just money, store of value, send and receive with Bitcoin. Now we're taking further layers, such as being able to trade, and then also being able to borrow and lend and earn yield, and being able to do that
and write options.
Exactly, more advanced trading functionalities such as options. Being able to do that in a contract or a program. I hate smart contract. People might have heard that term, smart contracts. I think they're just dumb programs. Right? They're super simple programs. They're generally dumb because they just know what they execute. But being able to take these financial primitives and implement them in code on Ethereum, at first Ethereum, and then now other chains such as Solana, and others, that's what gives those assets value, right? Because you actually pay the fees to execute transactions on that chain using these other coins, which now as an investor, you ask yourself, what makes these interesting? Well, that's what actually makes them interesting is they can execute these programs. Some of them are also faster and cheaper to execute. That's the true value proposition versus like a meme coin, which, a picture of a dog or whatnot. And that is, like you said, a very different story than Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin at this point, it started off with, hey, it's money I can send and receive anywhere. That's still true, although it's very expensive to do so. And hence the narrative changing to it's a store of wealth that you don't move very often.
Yeah.
It's like, don't move it because
and that's fine. I mean,
it's hard.
Like I said, we're not going to debate the merits.
No, we're not. We're not trying to debate that at all.
Yeah.
We're agreeing there.
Let's talk about. I know some of our viewers always want to hear like favorite cryptos, and so outside of Bitcoin, and let's exclude Ethereum and exclude Solana as well, because those are the 3 top coins right now. What else do you think people should be buying?
So funny thing is we've always liked utility.
Yeah, exactly.
We like utility.
Yes.
Unfortunately, some of the most, I think, utility high coins aren't achieving a lot of the value. I'm big into the privacy coins.
Okay.
And I think they have some of the best utility. However, they have not achieved the highest returns.
I
over
don't
the
think
years.
I don't own any privacy coins because I don't think there's high returns. And
There aren't any high returns.
For just because of the liquidity problem.
Yeah,
right?
it's a huge liquidity problem.
And the
governments don't
never
like
gonna-
them.
Yeah, exactly. So
When
I
the
don't,
governments
I
don't
don't
like them. Exchanges don't like them.
I don't touch them for that reason.
You know?
So
But if you look at what a transaction looks like on chain, people say Bitcoin was. They used to say Bitcoin was private, and we know now that it's not. But then, just how bad is it? It is in some
Bitcoin
ways
is
more private.
pseudonymous. It's not anonymous.
It's not anonymous. It's not anonymous for sure. But to give your audience an understanding of how not private it is, people think the banking system's not private. Like the government knows everything I do. Venmo knows everything I do with Venmo, and that by and large is true. But when I send you a Venmo transaction, you have no clue what I've done with my Venmo account, and that's not true with Bitcoin. It's horribly not true with Ethereum and Solana, in the sense that as soon as I send you money or anything, a transaction,
your history.
you know something about my history. And I know something about your history. And that's vastly different from Venmo and PayPal.
Okay, so but let's move on. So unfortunately, privacy coins don't have upward momentum because of regulatory headwind. Call it that.
Current regulatory headwind, correct. But for the foreseeable future, you're
what else
correct.
would you go into?
The coins that by and large have a necessity in a DeFi protocol.
Okay.
Right. And this is a whole category that people ask, like, well, what in the world exactly is this coin? How does it work? Let's take a coin as an example, Aave, or a protocol like Aave. Right, this is a borrowing and lending protocol. This allows someone to take even Bitcoin, like wrap Bitcoin, which is a tokenized version of Bitcoin, onto Ethereum and Polygon. I think it even exists on Solana, on that network, and put it as collateral, take out a loan against it. That entire protocol is governed by a token called Aave, right? The rewards, though, of that protocol charges fees. You pay it in interest as well. Now, the ability for that token to garner aspects of fees on the network gives it inherent value, and that to me is interesting.
So I mean, so you're talking about the categories, so like Aave, Uniswap, DYDX.
If their token specifically is more than just governance.
So have you looked at the tokenomics of all three?
Not of all three.
Okay, but do you like the Aave one the most so far?
That one doesn't collect enough.
There's GMX as well, I think.
GMX is another on, I think Arbitrum is a big chain. But the concept of a token that both governs a protocol, because each protocol needs some level of governance. People have to be able to take that protocol and change it. Voting rights. But voting rights isn't good enough.
Yeah.
It's not good enough.
It needs to have a yield, a return.
It needs to have some kind of return. And really all you're doing is you're taking, for example, a loan that a bank would offer, right, or a product like an exchange and the fees that it would take, and distributing it to all the people that help govern the protocol. That to me is a valid monetary model, right? That makes sense. You're just replacing the bank with a protocol, and instead of the bank earning money, it's all of the token holders. The way the bank would normally have shareholders that say, hey, you should control the product lineup. This is now another product. I'm a quote unquote somewhat of a shareholder. The SEC will hate that I said that, but by owning the token, you're
a lot of people think that tokens are shares. They're not shares, but
not shares.
But yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so what about you? So I mean, what about
utility?
Decentralized compute stuff? Like I like Render. I like Render a lot actually because compute's moving to GPUs.
Right.
Decentralized GPUs. So Render is fantastic. They're doing amazing stuff with Vision Pro and. And just the way the whole sort of metaverse is shaping out with Apple Vision Pro, the ability to render these large scale objects. I think a lot of the guys doing stuff at the Sphere in Vegas, they have to use Render to do it. So it's kind of cool. I like Filecoin.
Right,
long-term Filecoin bull. Filecoin's got some tokenomic problems, which I think that are going to be addressed hopefully in the next.
Hopefully, it hasn't done as well as I think a lot of Filecoin fans.
But the utility is pretty good. People are using it.
Its utility makes sense.
Great. Yeah, utility makes sense. So you can store files there. But as a long-term investment, I think that's a good one. Obviously, Solana fan as well.
Of course, trying to be the better Ethereum and be able to scale much better.
Yeah. And then there's others. I mean, look, it's a long list. I always tell people, look, there's a lot of speculation that you can do on the sort of the long tail of crypto. But out of 10,000 cryptos out there, 9,900 are probably
Garbage.
junk. They're
total
garbage.
junk.
So it's really hard to go and find the good stuff amongst them. And maybe out of the 9,900, maybe like 1 or 2 will surprise me, or maybe 5 or 10.
Right.
But the majority are going to zero, and it's a scam, and it's or it's a grift. Right? Would
Yeah.
you agree with that?
I would agree with it for sure, and I would tell people that are investing in these other cryptos, other than say Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, like you said, is really treat them as like mini startups.
Yeah.
And how would you evaluate that a company you would invest in?
It's always the people.
It's
always the people.
It's the
man.
people starting. It's the people starting it, and also the product, some aspect of the product
And
as
the
well.
coin distribution, the unlocks, the investors, and what the motivations are. It becomes very difficult.
It's a difficult thing,
Yeah.
no question about it. But with that difficulty is opportunity. And if you think about it, for a lot of people, they don't have that opportunity to invest in kind of small scale startups.
I agree.
And
so
this is
put
the
in
closest
small
thing.
amounts of money that
exactly.
you're willing to lose, and go and bet on things that you think is interesting.
Yep.
But do it where there's a team that's committed to it, that have worked, that have shown up for it. But always look at the tokenomics of it and see who owns what. Because what happens, I've seen this many times. These projects hype it. Like I'd say I almost never buy things that I'm seeing hype for, because the moment it's being hyped, someone's
It's too late already.
and someone's trying to dump,
Yeah.
and then you see the coins move and they just dump, and the price goes all the way back down.
Yep, exactly. And so the team, the tokenomics, and tokenomics is a new word. People are like, what the hell do you mean, Vinny, by tokenomics? And
It's
to make the
economics behind the token.
Yeah, what makes the token valuable?
Yeah.
Because it's not shares in a company where if the company does well, the shares go up because that's rights at liquidation.
Yeah.
Instead, the token has to have a need for people to buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and in the
hold
old
it,
days,
and hold it as well.
In the days of kind of the ICOs, I remember we had to ICO, initial coin offering.
Yeah.
A lot of projects would say, no, don't use that term because it's too close to IPO, and
Yeah.
SEC is going to get on our case. A lot of talk was around how do we make sure that this token has utility. Well, we would call it like software
token.
rights,
Yeah,
right? It is the right to use the software.
Yeah.
And that software is the protocol, such as a borrowing or lending protocol, and maybe this is the thing that would pay fees. One project I liked a long time ago, ironically, is now coming back. The project itself, but now the idea is coming back, which is a decentralized marketplace for not futures, but what's the term? Augur was the original one. Which was a prediction market.
Yeah.
Market for prediction.
What's it called?
There are several now. I don't have the exact one.
Yeah, we need liquid prediction markets, but
it was very illiquid.
The problem is that the illiquidity of these prediction markets
is really poor.
Yeah, it's
but if you think about the utility of that token,
Mm-hmm.
right, it had a really good purpose because they're like, it's not an ICO, it's rights to use the software. Is you needed this token for this prediction market to be able to report on the outcome of the prediction market.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the token, you couldn't report. But by reporting, you don't even have to guess. You're just selling the truth.
Yeah.
All I do is I'm saying
And
this
you-
is who
and
won the
you-
election.
You earn some rewards.
And you earn some rewards.
It's great, yeah.
It was great. It made perfect sense. It just didn't have, like you said, not enough liquidity. It was early
I think
for its
Augur's
time.
biggest problem was also the complexity of the system they had built and the scalability issues that they had.
Which have all improved now. They got things like
improved now.
Solana. So now it's a perfect
You
time
could
for
build Augur and Solana.
for
That was
prediction
Jeremy Gardner's startup. I mean, he was.
It was one of his original ones. We partnered with them.
Paul, this has been a great chat. Where can people find you online, and how do
Just
they
gotta follow
engage with
through.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I am on Twitter on occasion. So Paulinator there with 2 L's, Paull, Nator. But Edge is the easiest way to find me. I think all my links are on there, edge.app, and you'll see me as one of the founders on the About page. There's links to my LinkedIn, my Twitter. I think you can even find my email there. And happy to get any feedback and contact from anyone listening to the podcast and see what they thought.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Great having you on the show.
Thanks for having me.